Okay, so hey there guys. So today's video is going to be, as you see from the title, my favorite eyeshadows in my favorite eyeshadow palettes. I'm basically going to call it just my favorite eyeshadow in the palette, but I'm going to try and narrow it down to one shade per palette of my favorite eyeshadow palettes that I use basically on a weekly basis. Um, I tried to pull as many eyeshadow palettes as I could, around 20 eyeshadow palettes because I have around 50 eyeshadow palettes myself, and I really just want to go over the eyeshadows that I really do love in these palettes. I thought it would be a fun video to make because I did see this video on another YouTuber's channel. I forgot her name, but as soon as I saw the video, I was like, that would be a really fun video to film. So I decided to film today. I actually just got home from work around an hour and a half ago, and I am super tired. So if I sound tired or look tired or like I'm pretty low energy, it's just because I am super tired. I don't really normally stay in anymore, and I did go to Massachusetts this weekend to see my sister's show, so I'm a little bit run down. I've been kind of making up for no sleep the past weekend, and I'm still exhausted. So let's jump into probably my top 5 favorite palettes, and then we'll go from there. So I just want to mention this palette first because it's the first one that's in front of me. So I'm going to talk about this palette first. So this is the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette. I'm going to take it out of its sleeve. This is like one of my all-time favorite warm tone palettes. I wear this constantly in the summertime. I've been wearing this like once a week. I just love it so much. Such a gorgeous palette. Love the warm tones in here. But I think my absolute favorite shade in this palette has to be Scorched, and that's this shade right here. It is just such a gorgeous metallic bronze shade. I don't think I have anything like it in my collection. It's just so pigmented. It's so glittery, so metallic, and it's just so gorgeous on the lid. So that one is Scorched. And these Naked Heat Urban Decay eyeshadows are unlike any of their other formulas. They're just so amazingly pigmented. They're so buttery, so shimmery. I love them so much. So this one is the shade Scorch, and it's this beautiful, like, bronzy tone, glittery eyeshadow, and I just love it so much. It's like a copper eyeshadow, and it's one of my favorites. So, yeah, that's probably my favorite shade in the palette. The runner-up would probably be either He Devil or Dirty Talk. The He Devil is such a gorgeous crease shade, and Dirty Talk is a beautiful lid shade as well, but Scorch is definitely more metallic. And you guys know I love the shimmer shades in any palette. I'm just all about the shimmer. With any of my looks, I'm just so obsessed with shimmery shades, so I gotta have a little bit of shimmer in my life. So that is definitely a really good one. Okay, then the next palette, of course, is one of my holy grails, and I have to mention this palette in this video, and of course I'm talking about the Anastasia Mono Renaissance palette. I'm actually wearing it on my eyes today with a milk pigment on my lid. I did just use some of the shades today as my crease shades, and I use this palette so much, you guys. Sorry, I'm trying to film as my mom is vacuuming in the bathroom. Like, I never get to sit down and film a video, like, after work, because I always have to deal with her, like, doing something right next to me or bothering me about something, and it just drives me insane. But anyway, so this is the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette. You guys know it's one of my all-time faves. It's the only palette that I've actually hit pan on 2 of the eyeshadows. I'm wearing most of the shades today. For this palette, though, it was very hard for me to actually pick out my favorite shade because there's not really that many lid options in here. There's a ton of matte options, but I think if I had to pick one shade in here, I think my absolute favorite shade is Venetian Red, which is this shade right here. It's just such a unique matte red shade, and it's such a gorgeous color. I was gonna say Love Letter, but as I was thinking about it, I'm like, Venetian Red is such a gorgeous shade, so I decided to pick this one. But again, it's a little bit hard for me to determine which one because the neutral shades are gorgeous as well. I'm basically wearing all the neutral shades today. Like, I'm mostly wearing these 4 shades in my crease and like this on my outer corners. But this shade is a gorgeous red shade, and I'm trying to swatch it as pigmented as possible, but it's such a beautiful matte red shade. It's one of my all-time favorite matte reds, and I love doing a fall. Okay, so moving on from those two palettes, I will re-swatch them in the end so we can talk about like how it actually looks together in the end, because a lot of people who do these videos, they usually like swatch them all at the end and like show how like their palette would look with their favorite shades. So now let's move on to the Colored Rain Queen of Hearts palette, which is one of my all-time faves as well. I do love the Anastasia Modern Renaissance, but there aren't like a million lid shade options in that palette, and I feel like my Modern Renaissance palette is starting to go a little bit bad, honestly, because I find that the eyeshadows really do fade throughout the day now. So I might have to replace mine at some point. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of annoying because I want to hit pan on some of the shades. So I'm probably going to keep it for the rest of this year, and then I might declutter it after this year. But I'm going to continue to use it throughout the year. So now let's talk about the Colored Rain Queen of Hearts palette, because we're done talking about the Anastasia Modern Renaissance. And I think, of course, when I talk about this palette, I mean, this palette is freaking amazing, and I've actually been reaching for it a lot more often this past month. I wasn't using it for like a month or two, because usually I gravitate towards this palette more for the fall time, but I actually just used it, I think, is it yesterday? I think I just used this yesterday for my eyeshadow for work. And I just love this palette. It's so good, but I think my absolute favorite in this palette, of course, is the Pure Gold shimmery shade, and that shade is called Your Majesty. These shimmery shades perform like they're wet. They are literally so gorgeous. And this is the Your Majesty shade. Oh my god, it's so stunning. So this one is the Your Majesty shade. It's kind of like a bronzy gold, which are like my favorite eyeshadows anyway. I just love gold anything. I love gold highlighters. I love gold lids. I just love gold. But it's such a gorgeous eyeshadow, you guys. So that is definitely my favorite shade in this palette. The mattes are amazing. The shimmers are amazing. This is such a great palette, you guys. Definitely better than the Juvia's Place palette, which we are going to be talking about. But this is definitely a better palette overall. So that one is my favorite shade in this palette. I also love the other lid shades and the matte shades, but that's definitely my favorite shade. Okay, now let's move on to Lime Crime. I'm going to talk about this one first. I definitely have a couple more eyeshadow palettes back here that I definitely don't want to forget about mentioning. But of course, I have to mention the Lime Crime Venus 1 palette. This is one of my all-time favorite palettes. And my favorite shade in this palette is the Aura shade, which is this shade right here. I'm going to try and film this as fast as possible because I'm trying to film this before my mom like comes back downstairs, because my mom is like a pain in the ass. So, anyway, this shade is called Aura. It's a gorgeous yellowy, shimmery kind of shade, and it's so freaking pigmented. This eyeshadow palette is so pigmented. They last forever on the eyes, and every time I use it, I just love it more and more. So this one is the Aura shade, which is a gorgeous yellowy kind of shade, and it is just so beautiful on the eyes. I love using it on the lid, but usually I always use this on the inner corners when I use this palette. But all of these shades are just beautiful. I used this like a couple of weeks ago when my best friend was here. I need to use it more often this summer. I haven't been using it as often as I would like to, because I always end up using the Venus XL palette over this one, because that one has a lot more options. And speaking of the Venus XL palette, why don't we just jump into this palette? This has become like one of my all-time favorite palettes. It's just the quality and consistency and pigmentation of Lime Crime eyeshadows are just one of the best. I absolutely love the Lime Crime eyeshadow formula. They last such a long time on the lids and on the eyes. And my favorite shade in this palette is the shade Love, which is this shade right here. It's just such a gorgeous lid shade, and it's just so beautiful. I feel like it kind of amps up any neutral look. Like, it's not a basic shimmery brown. It kind of has some interest to it. It's just so pretty. So that one is the shade Love right there. And it's just such a pretty soft, purple, soft, shimmery brown shade, and I absolutely love it. It's just so beautiful. I also love Idolized as well. I pretty much use that in every single look. It's such a beautiful matte brown, but for shimmer, that one is definitely my absolute favorite in this palette. I like some of the other shimmer shades as well, but the mattes are just so bomb in this palette. There's so many amazing mattes in this palette, but that's definitely my favorite shimmery shade. Okay, so those are those palettes. I just want to, oh my god, can you not drop everything? I just want to re-swatch the eyeshadows that I mentioned before so we can talk about the other ones because I kind of want to see what they look like next to each other. I mean, I basically have a theme of bronzy tone shimmery shades, but those are like my absolute favorites, and it's funny that I'm not wearing those today. But I just love a red. My favorite kind of eyes to do are red toned eyes for the fall. That's like my favorite. I love those types of eye looks, neutral looks, or just a neutral look with a gold lid shade, because those are my favorites, like a warm crease with a gold lid. That's my absolute, one of my absolute favorite looks to do. Okay, so those are so far like basically like my top 5 eyeshadow palettes. I absolutely love these eyeshadow palettes. Now let's move on to Jouer. I absolutely love this eyeshadow palette. It's so amazing. This is the Jouer Skinny Dip palette. And I've been trying to use this more often in the summertime because this is one of my favorite summertime palettes to use. And I love the packaging. It's just so pretty. So this is the Jouer Skinny Dip palette. And this one just comes with all foiled shadows, so it's not going to be surprising if I pick out a shimmery eyeshadow. It is so hard for me to pick my favorite in this palette, but if I had to pick one, it would probably be Starlight. This is such a gorgeous silver shade. I absolutely love it. It's just so pigmented. Look at this. It's just so metallic and gorgeous that I think that this one's my favorite shade. I was going to pick Skinny Dip, but I think this one's my favorite. Like, look at that. It's so freaking blinding. I love it so much. I love using that shade. It's so hard not to choose Skinny Dip too, because I absolutely love the Skinny Dip shade, which is this gold shimmery metallic shade. But these are amazing. I love these eyeshadows, but I probably use, out of all the shades in this palette, I probably use only 4 of these as much as I should use them. A lot more often, I mean, which is Starlight, Skinny Dip, Tan Lines, and Magic Hour. I don't really use Bikini or Midnight Swim as often as I should. I definitely use Midnight Swim more. Bikini is like kind of the only one that's not super pigmented, but they like perform wet. So I had to mention this palette because they are amazing. But that's definitely my favorite shade. It's just so glittery and beautiful. I love Tan Lines and Skinny Dip as well. But that one is just, it's blinding. Like, it's so blinding. I love this palette. And I feel like that this palette just does not get enough love on YouTube. But it's such a gorgeous palette. If I'm like really not completing a thought or something, I'm sorry. I'm so hungry. I'm waiting for dinner to be ready. I'm starving. Okay. So the next palette I wanted to talk about is one of my recent favorites this year. I just love this palette so much. It's the ColourPop Dream Sheet palette. I don't think I have a favorites video where I don't mention this palette because I just use it so much. But I use this palette like pretty much on a weekly basis. I love it so much. I love this palette. And my favorite shade in this palette would have to be this bronzy tone shade right here. And this one is called Stardust. Excuse me. And it's a beautiful coppery lid shade. I know, but it's so pretty. I also love the one next to it as well, but I think this one is my favorite. Let's see if this one's a dupe for the Scorch shade. Oh my god, they are so similar. The Scorch shade is actually a little bit more of a pinky kind of bronzy shade. The Stardust shade is a little bit more bronzy tone. So that one is Stardust. So they are different. That one is Scorched from the Urban Decay Naked Heat. And this one is actually, what shade is that? That might be from the Lime Crime palette. I don't know, whatever. But that one's such a gorgeous shade, so I had to mention that one. I absolutely love this palette, and I love the ColourPop formula, but this is the only ColourPop palette that I own, so I had to mention one of them. Okay, now let's move on to some Too Faced palettes. I don't really love Too Faced as a company anymore, but they're kind of very nostalgic to me because I love the chocolate bar formula. They're like one of the first formulas I fell in love with in eyeshadow palettes. So I wanted to mention the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette first because I've just been using this palette a ton this summer, so I really wanted to mention one of the shades in this palette because it's been my favorite shade in this palette for such a long time. And that one is, of course, the shade Luscious, and that one's this one right here. Honestly, if I didn't have this palette and just had this eyeshadow in a single, that's all I would need because I absolutely love it. There's just something so different about this shade. It's just so metallic and beautiful. There's always like one shade in every single Too Faced palette that I absolutely fall in love with. It's just so beautiful. That one is Luscious right there. It's just so reflective, so pigmented. It's so soft and beautiful on the eyes that I had to mention that one. That's my absolute favorite shade in this palette. And I know there's a theme here, but I can't help it. I haven't really mentioned any mattes yet. So, of course, my next favorite Too Faced palette is the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette. And I had to mention my favorite shade in this one. And honestly, again, it's another shimmery tone shade. But the metallics in this palette are some of the best metallics I've ever used before. There's something so different about these metallics in the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette. And I'm mostly talking about these two shades here, Salted Caramel and what is this gold shade? Creme Brulee. But my absolute favorite, of course, is this shade here. And that one's actually called Marzipan. This one's called Salted Caramel, Caitlin. That one is your favorite crease shade. But this one is my absolute favorite shade in the palette. It's just a gorgeous metallic shade. Like, as you guys can see, I have a huge dip in it, but it is beautiful. It actually is very similar to Luscious. So that one is Marzipan. I know they're very similar, actually. I've never really swatched them next to each other. But they're both just so gorgeous, and they're my two favorites. I would be lying if I didn't mention both of them just because they're too similar, because I love both of them so freaking much. So that one is Marzipan. It's just so beautiful on the lids. I just love this chocolate bar formula of these shimmers. They're just amazing. I have such a headache too. Oh my god. But at least this is really not that long of a video to film. It doesn't really take that long for me to show you guys my favorite, basically, lid shades, because I live for lid shades. So the next palette is the Too Faced Semi-Sweet Chocolate Bar palette, because I just wanted to mention my favorite shades in these palettes because I really do love them. And my favorite shade in this palette, honestly, this palette doesn't really speak to me anymore, honestly. I really thought it was my favorite, but I would have to say in this palette, my favorite shade would be Peanut Butter. Because peanut butter is like the OG, and it's the OG in this palette. And that's what started the crazy trend of the peanut butter craze for Too Faced. So I'd have to say Peanut Butter is my favorite shade. It's a gorgeous matte warm brown tone shade, and I think it kind of inspired a lot of other brands to make like warmer tone eyeshadow palettes, but the formula of chocolate bar palettes are just phenomenal. But that is a gorgeous crease shade, so that would definitely be my favorite crease shade out of any palette that I'm mentioning, because it's just a gorgeous palette. It's just a gorgeous formula, the chocolate bar formula. I wouldn't really say any of these shimmer shades are really like my favorites anymore. I think I prefer more of the chocolate bar original one than this one. So I don't really reach for this one as much as the chocolate bar palette now. I just realized that the original one is definitely more of my favorite one. Okay, and then in the Too Faced Chocolate Bonbons palette, because again, I just love the eyeshadow formula in these Too Faced Chocolate Bar palettes. My favorite shade in this palette, of course, is Satin Sheets, and that one's this one right here. I'm not sure if this was a repeat shade when they actually made this palette, because this shade has been in a lot of palettes, but if it is, I'm sorry, but it is my favorite shade in this palette. It's just a gorgeous shimmery toned uh, champagne kind of shade. And look how pigmented that is. Like, they do not make their palettes like they used to, honestly. Like, they really did have lowered their quality a lot. But that one is Satin Sheets. It's such a gorgeous champagne color. Oh my god, it's so beautiful and reflective. I love that color. So that's definitely my favorite shade in that palette. But the Chocolate Bar formula is one of my favorite formulas. So I would be lying if I didn't mention those palettes. So I had to mention them. And then, of course, I had to mention another OG, which is the Too Faced Natural Eyes palette. This was definitely one of my all-time favorite, or my all-time favorite neutral palette when I first got it. So this one is the Too Faced Natural Eyes palette. And my favorite shade in here, again, I know it's a shimmery shade, but that's what I go for. And that one is the shade Silk Teddy, and that one is this one right here. Again, it has like that gorgeous, like silky formula that I absolutely love about Too Faced palettes. So this one is Silk Teddy, and it's a little bit more of a white toned shimmery shade as compared to Satin Sheets, but that one is Silk Teddy. And it's a gorgeous like pink champagne kind of shade. And this is basically the only shade that I use on my lid in this palette because I keep on trying to hit pan on it. But it's just so difficult to hit pan on Too Faced palettes. But I have a very big dip in it because I use it every single time I use this palette on my lid. So that one is my favorite shade in that palette. And then, of course, I had to mention the Too Faced Peanut Butter and Jelly palettes because I actually really love this palette as well. The quality for the Too Faced Honey palette I heard was not half as good as the Peanut Butter and Jelly palette, so I never got that one. Pretty much the last Too Faced palette that I did purchase was the Sweet Peach palette, so I haven't purchased one of their palettes in about like a year and a half now. It's just crazy how they used to be my favorite brand and now like I could care less about their products because I'm really just not a fan of them anymore. But my favorite shade in this palette has to be Bananas. This one has such a gorgeous formula and it's so beautiful on the inner corners. I actually never really wear this one on my lid. I mostly wear peanut brittle on my lid. But this one's just such a gorgeous gold shade and it's just my favorite in the palette. I'm sorry, but it's such a gorgeous gold. And this one is the shade Bananas and that one is a light gold shade. And it's just such a pretty color. I love that for the inner corners, and it just has such a buttery formula that's why I love using that one on my inner corners, and that's why I use these other ones like in the crease, on my outer corners. This one is so gorgeous on the crease to define it. This one's called Nuts About You. It's a gorgeous like orangey matte crease shade. I'm sorry. This video is such a disaster. Okay. I'm not sure if I'm going to mention the other Too Faced palette. So far we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 13 eyeshadow palettes. I wanted to do about 20 eyeshadow palettes, so let's keep on going. So the next palette I wanted to mention is just another one from Urban Decay. I should have mentioned this in the beginning with the Naked Heat, but I forgot. So this one is the Urban Decay Naked palette. This is my other favorite Urban Decay palette, like Naked palette. I think that the quality in this palette is definitely the best besides the Naked Heat palette. I don't really have a favorite shade in this palette, to be honest, but if I had to pick one, I mean, I really like all of them. They're all gorgeous. But if I had to pick one out of this palette, the lid shades are gorgeous. I love Sidecar. I love Half Baked. I love Sin. I love Virgin. I love Toasted. It's such a beautiful palette. This is the OG, you guys, and it's such a gorgeous palette. But if I had to pick one, I think I would say Naked. It's such a gorgeous crease shade, and this would be like the only crease shade I would need with like any of these palettes or any of these eyeshadows, that I would say Naked. It's such a pretty crease shade. So I would say Naked. Yeah, why not? Because I know I love all of these shimmery shades. I mean, I probably would have said Sidecar because that's my favorite lid shade in this palette. But I use these for the crease all the time for this palette, obviously, because these are like the two matte browns in this palette. So, and they're a really good formula. So I would definitely say Naked. Yeah, I don't regret saying that at all. And then for my last, like, really, like, favorite palette that I'm going to mention, and then I'm just going to mention some, like, just honestly for the lid shade, I'm going to mention the palette. Well, this one's a all-time favorite as well, but I don't really use it anymore, but this is definitely one of my all-time favorite palettes. I know people don't really, like, love her right now, but I have to mention this palette, and that is the Kat Von D Metal Matte palette. This is, like, the best holiday palette you could ever buy. Like, it's just, I use this so much, you guys. Like, I didn't even think I was going to use this palette as much when I first got it because I was so overwhelmed by all the shades. But I use this palette a ton. A ton. And for my favorite shade in this palette would have to be the shade Glitz. And that's this shade right here because I do use this shade the most out of all of these shimmery shades. I was going to say Flash, but I really don't use this shade as often as I should. When I do use like a shimmery yellow shade, I usually use ColourPop's Telepathy or like Makeup Geek's Untamed or Fortune Cookie. I don't really gravitate towards this one. And the matte shades are gorgeous in this palette. I probably should pick one matte and one shimmery shade, but I'm trying to just narrow it down to just one shade. So I'd have to say Glitz. It's such a gorgeous, like, soft pinky shade. I don't know how to explain it. It's just so pretty. It kind of reminds me of Silk Teddy. So that one is Glitz by Kat Von D. It's just a really beautiful shimmery shade. You can wear it all over the lid, all over the inner corners, and it really is beautiful. But I love this palette. I could not mention my favorite palettes without mentioning this one because it's amazing. It really is an amazing eyeshadow palette. I'm putting it in backwards. Alright, so those are all like basically my favorite palettes. Now I'm just going to mention the lid shades that I absolutely love in some of these eyeshadow palettes. They're not necessarily my favorites, like formula-wise, but I absolutely love the shimmer shades in the Juvia's Place Masquerade Mini Palette. I think that her shimmer shades are amazing, like amazing. Some of them are super crumbly, like the matte shades in here are super crumbly, but the lid shades are beautiful. And then, of course, my favorite shade in this palette is this shade right here, and that one is called Giza. Giza and Dahlia are amazing formula-wise. They're just so buttery and they're so shimmery. And this one is Giza. So that one is just super pigmented. I love it so much. And that one is Giza right there. It's so pretty. I have to run because dinner is ready. But that one is Giza. Look at that shade. Isn't it so beautiful? It's so metallic, so buttery. And I absolutely love that shade. Alright, so we did 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 16. Sorry, my mom's screaming again, as usual. Should we talk about any more? I'm just going to mention 2 more, and that's it. So the next palette is the Manny MUA Makeup Geek palette. I'm only mentioning this because I love Makeup Geek eyeshadows, and this is the only Makeup Geek palette that I own. I don't really love Manny MUA anymore, but I really want to mention my favorite shade in this palette because I'm not going to mention my single eyeshadows from Makeup Geek. I wanted to stick to just palettes, and that shade is Luna, and that shade is right there. It's such a gorgeous foiled shade. I absolutely love this. I'm trying to hit pan on it at some point, but yeah, definitely not today. But that one is Luna. Look how gorgeous that is. I love wearing this shade on the lid. It's such a gorgeous shade. So that one is Luna right there. I absolutely love that color. It's such a beautiful, again, like champagne-y kind of foiled shadow. I love it. And then the next palette, which is one of my all-time favorite palettes, and I just wanted to mention this palette because I don't use it anymore because it's like, I feel like it's really dried out, but this one is the Urban Decay Electric palette. And I used to use this palette like freaking crazy. I have to be careful with swatching this though because it might stain my hand, but I wanted to mention my favorite shade in this palette, and that one is called Gonzo, and that one is this electric blue shade. It's so amazing. And that one is Gonzo. Look how beautiful. Oh my god, I haven't swatched this palette in a while, but I just remember how much I used to freaking love this palette. So that one is Gonzo right there. I mean, that one is so different compared to all the other shades. And that one is Gonzo right there. And then the last shade I wanted to mention is by Becca Jaclyn Hill. This isn't my one of my all-time favorite palettes, but I do love one of the shades in here. And that one is called Chardonnay, and that one is right here. I know a lot of people had very mixed reviews about this palette, but I really liked it. And I want to mention it because, you know, I mentioned Kathleen Lights, I mentioned Manny MUA, so I wanted to mention one of my favorites too. I do really love Jaclyn, and that one is Chardonnay right there. It's a beautiful yellow tone champagne kind of shade. So this is basically what my palette would look like. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I guess we should make it 20. And I'm just going to mention the Too Faced Sugar Pop palette because I would mention, you know what? No. I want to mention the Stila Eyes Are the Window Soul palette. I like this palette more. And we've mentioned so many Too Faced palettes already. I like this palette more than the Sugar Pop palette. And again, it's going to be a shimmery champagne shade, but I absolutely love Kitten. Who doesn't love Kitten by Stila? It's such a beautiful shade. And I actually really like the formula of these Eyes Are the Window palettes. And Kitten is just such a beautiful shade. Everybody loves it. It's such a cult classic, and it's amazing. I use it every single time that I wear a shade, lid shade from this palette. I always use Kitten because it's phenomenal. So I'm going to go eat dinner now. Alright, you guys, so that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. That's basically what my palette would look like if I decided to not have all of these palettes and just make my own palette. But obviously I would make my palette look a little bit more practical. Honestly, I would have no idea what I would put in my own palette, but I think it's kind of fun to see what your favorite shades would be. And sorry this video was so discombobulated and stuff. I'm so hungry right now. So I love you guys. Please subscribe, follow me on all my social media, and let me know what your favorite eyeshadow palette is, basically, and what your favorite lid shade is in that palette. You know what? Scratch that. Let me know what your favorite eyeshadows are in your favorite palettes. Okay? Let's just make it a lot simpler because I said that's so weird. So I love you guys. Bye. And plus, I really wanted to film in this shirt because I just got it yesterday from Lucky, so I really wanted to film in it. It's so cute, right? And I actually got it with these jeans that I'm wearing as well. You'll probably see this in a haul at some point. Can I please not do that? These are so cute too. They have a floral print on them, and that's all on the jean, and I absolutely love them. Obsessed with them already, and I got those yesterday too. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Bye!